distributed throughout the known world in Mandarin, in English throughout the English-speaking world, and also in those areas of Africa and Latin America, the Middle East, Russia, Oceania, everywhere. People get access to this every day, inundated with voices throughout the world. But for the deplorables here at home, remember, it all rests on your shoulders. We already got a victory. Wall Street fought that. That's $800 billion of pension fund money that now is taken away from them. I got to tell you, when Roger Robinson walks you through that, my head explodes. Listen, this is all going to be judged by history. Every action that's taken its place here is going to be judged by history. And when people talk to me about this, I say, hey, just leave it all on the field, right? In that 1 nanosecond of consciousness you have before you go to the great unknown, just remember, you can answer to yourself, I left it all on the field, okay? That's what Roger Robinson's doing. That's what patriots are doing. And they're doing it not just for their own countrymen. They're doing it for the Chinese people and all mankind. This is the great fourth turning. The Revolution, the Civil War, the Great Depression of World War II, and now it's here. There are decades in which nothing happened, and then there are months in which decades happen. And we have had a January, a February, a March, and April, and now in May, that they're going to be talking about hundreds of years from now, like we talk about the Revolution and the Civil War in World War II.
I think one of the things that came out with both Sherry Markson and Roger Robinson that's important for our listeners to understand is this is a bipartisan issue. Neither one of these guys, both the author from Australia and Roger, they make it clear that this is not about Republican, Democrats, liberal, conservative. This is about basic human rights and basic fairness, that these companies have to comply with the same rules that the rest of the world does. And this is true with their labs and with the capital markets.
Look, you had the Obama delegate, you read the great message he sent us today on John Frederick's radio show, and I was doing it. They had people texting him that were Democrats that say they listen to the show every day and they know we're partisans, but we present it in a way that we don't take cheap shots at people. We had Bob Kuttner on yesterday. I'm a huge Bob Kuttner fan, although he's not just a fan of ours, not a fan of Trump's or anything, but he has been at the forefront of fighting about these manufacturing jobs, and he has been like a prophet for decades, saying, and he's like Breitbart was to the Republican establishment, he is to the Democratic establishment. He hates those Wall Street Democrats more than he hates the Trump guys, right? And he thinks the Trump deplorables. He told me beforehand, he says, look, the brilliance of what you guys did is you've got working class Democrats in those upper Midwest states that either voted for Trump or stayed home, right? Because remember, hey, we'll take a stay at home. We'd love to have your vote, but if you just want to sit this one out, and particularly on November 3rd of this year, if you just want to sit it out, and here's the reason. Can we go – and guys, jump in because I don't want to hog the mic too much. I want to play that Morning Joe clip, and here's the difference between Roger Robinson and here's the difference between War and this other nudge, and all they are is nudges, and they're just going to sit here, and now it's going to yammer. We're going to be, Morning Joe. We're going to be in the world stage for 25 or 30 years. And Joe, pull your passport out and show me that you've been somewhere farther away from home than South Padre Island, okay? You have no earthly idea what you're talking about. Zero. You are a clown, okay? And I'm not going there. The president tweeted out again. I'm not going to the tawdry, intern and whatever happened there. You have to stand before God and answer that, right? That's not for us, right? We're not going to go there. Where we are going to go is your show is pure poison because all it does every day is lulls people to sleep. If you want to see the conventional wisdom, just cut on Morning Joe every day. That is the conventional wisdom, right? And Jason Miller and Stephen K. Bannon every morning of the campaign, you watch that and, man, Trump's going to lose by 20. Right? They're the one part of the problem.
Except when Joe and Mika came by the campaign office to kiss our ass.
Oh, God. Jason Miller.
That was November the 10th? Was that off election?
It was the same day.
I was there. I saw him.
It was the same day that you and Nigel and that crew – hold it. So Nigel and Raheem and all these guys, the UKIP, they show up. So I spent an hour. They got to see Trump. And I said, Trump, he's very busy. They take the elevator down, see Kellyanne. Next thing I know, I got a picture of Nigel Farage and Raheem up in the penthouse of the residence, hanging out with Trump, hanging out with the president-elect. I tell you, they get inside the wire. But that was the same day.
It was when they came by to visit the room, as President Trump called it. I remember the one time he was like, hey, Jace, what's this thing you have put together? It's called the room. And I'm like, the room? Like what are you talking about? And after a couple of minutes, I realized it's like, oh, you mean the war room? He's like, yeah, you have all these guys watching these TVs and monitoring everything. I'm like, yeah, come on down, check it out. And he walked in, we had Stephen Chung and the always sexy Andy Sarabian.
Andy Sarabian looking his best, like a troll under the bridge, right? That's a motley crew. No. But hey, that's where the president came down. He wanted to be where the action was. That's where he came down election night and hung out right with the entire team. It was pretty amazing. We had Stepien in our data room was like off where Navarro and Miller used to have the thing. It was quite something.
We'll go to the Morning Joe clip.
Yeah. We got to go to the Morning Joe because this is where we're fighting.
Yeah, this is Hater Central.
How do you manage this crisis? Deal with China, understanding they continue to lack transparency.
I think the most telling thing about the Biden ad that you ran earlier was the fact that essentially Biden was trying to outflank Trump in terms of being hawkish on China, which is, it demonstrates the shift in the country's mood. And we've seen that in terms of public opinion polling. And we've also seen that in the rhetoric coming from Washington, not just from Republicans, but also from Democrats. Clearly, China is viewed as a hostile threat in a way that wasn't even necessarily the case a year ago, because, let's face it, the coronavirus originated from there, and they were less than fully transparent in terms of what was going on.
And they go on, and Morning Joe says, "Oh, but you got to." His response to this is, "We got to learn how to cooperate, and we have these global problems, and we got to work together." No, and if you just woke up, Mr. Tufts professor, the people have been at this for years, calling these guys out because they're the enemy of their own people and mankind. Professor at Tufts. I think you're a tenured professor at Tufts. I'm not saying Tufts is not at the top, cutting edge. Jim Stavridis used to be the head there, Admiral Stavridis. Another conventional wisdom, unrestricted warfare. You should know, sir, if you're going to come on and be the grand poobah of like Richard Haas of the Council on Foreign Relations, a Cold War with China would be a mistake. Yes, this would be a mistake since they're at a hot war with us. Okay, that would be a big mistake because we would lose, which you have no problem with. You have no problem. This is the conventional wisdom and this mumbo jumbo, and then you get a patriot like Roger Robinson. And by the way, the audience here is the difference. The CCP, because they understand, they care about what you think, they care about what you do, and most importantly, they care about how you vote.
Speaking of war, there was also the clip that, Steve, that you saw this morning. I just couldn't do Morning Joe this morning. But
we switch off.
I know it's Axios has those days off for like mental sanity. We do the same thing. It's just one War Room team member can't watch Morning Joe every day. Otherwise, we'll just go crazy. But John Heilman actually had a really good point. You caught this, talking about when President Trump embraced the title of wartime president. Let's play the clip. This is actually pretty important.
And so, as you said, we saw this brief moment when Trump first, in the middle of March, said, this is a war. I'm not going to downplay this anymore. This is a war. We're on war footing. I'm a general in the war. You saw his numbers bounce a little bit for about a week or so.
This is the Jason Miller came up with that concept. I immediately stole it. I think it was great as an homage to Jason. No, but this is – and so the White House communications guys should embrace Heilman. That's why he doesn't need to go out to the Rose Garden, because we're going to fight war in the Rose Garden. What we need to do is Kayleigh's doing a fabulous job. She's Harvard graduate and a Georgetown graduate, just saying. She is fantastic. She should get out there and do more of these. And the president should come out with a bold move like a Churchill and a Roosevelt with a boom, the power moves that he's known for. You come out with power moves. Now, we got some time. We're going to have Schultz is listening on the conference call to the arguments of the Supreme Court. One of the biggest cases argued about separation of powers since Nixon back in the Watergate situation. But I want to get to – we got to talk about Fauci. This is what – and I'm so proud on this show of how we've gone about this and not attacked him for the Gates situation, although I guess we got some information on the Gates Foundation and Hillary Clinton and, his winking at Jonathan Karl and all this stuff. We have criticized him for not being what the mainstream – we want him to be what the mainstream media holds him up to be. We want him to be the evidence-based, database guy that puts the metrics out and is advising the president. My fear, and I think it's Donald Trump – nothing for him for Fauci to give that to the New York Times to email it over to him, right? I'd like to know from Dr. Fauci just something very basic. Please tell me in the councils of government on that task force when you're talking to the President of the United States, ye who supposedly gave him a model that he stopped the European traffic off of, right? Please tell me, when you sit there, have you walked him through, when you say it's going to be more agony and more deaths, what does that mean? What is the trade-off? What have you walked him through? What are the numbers? What are the metrics? What's the critical path? And have you advised him about an alternative? When you say more, and put it in a sense of being evidence-based, being data-driven, being science-based. I want to repeat the MSNBC meme every night, every Democrat. Evidence-based, data-based, science-based. Okay, we got it. We're saying let's do that. And let's have Birx and Fauci do it. And now that he's called out the President of the United States, let's be brutally frank about what he did. The President has been very methodical about devolving this back to the governors. 48 of the 50 states, as of last night, when Fauci sent that, 48 of the 50 states had opening programs, and the other two, I think, have joined, which is Ned Lamont in Connecticut, and I think Phil Murphy in New Jersey have now come out with, hey, here's what it's going to do. So 50 of 50 are to the starting line or rolling, and some have already launched, okay? Fauci comes out diametrically opposed to what the President of the United States has been saying he's got. And I got to tell you, since the Senate said yesterday, and we said this back on War Room Impeachment in January, when Lindsey Graham, and I love Senator Graham, when they said, oh, yeah, don't have these witnesses at the impeachment because we're going to have the hearings later. We're going to have the hearings later. We're going to do all this. I got those guys. Let me write that down. Hunter Biden, the whistleblower. I got it. Yesterday, they're marching up to Capitol Hill. They're marching up to the White House this afternoon and said, hey, upon further review, how about this? Nobody. They just all leaked it the other day in Politico. How about this? Nobody. No hearings. And I'm not saying you got to bring in Obama, and I'm not going to Obama yet. But all the other guys they promised. Now that the reports are coming out, now that we have the evidence, now that we have the testimony, we reviewed it. We don't need anybody. So. And even forget that for a second. Put a pin in this. In this right here, which you've got to drill down on, where's the hard questionings? Where's Lamar Alexander lighting these guys up? What have you been telling the president? And Redfield, the president turned to you on January 31st and said, what I got to do, Doc? I want the administrative state to tell me what I have to. I want the evidence-based, science-based, data-driven guys, Fauci, Collins, Redfield, Cadlick, tell me what I got to do. You have to do mass testing. How do I do that? Well, CDC's got it. We've got the mass testing. We're on this show, and I think our third or fourth episode, Hatfield said, hey, I don't think their test works. Right? I don't think you got to do all this funky stuff. You got the reagent. It's a two-part process. You got to send it back to Atlanta. We said, well, how many people? That's the mass testing go back to Atlanta?
My test?
Remember, Raheem took a test. It was 2 weeks.
Hey, have your results come back yet?
No, still waiting.
Okay.
The STD. No, this is a family show. I can't believe I went
Those
that.
Those came back in. No worries. I got all of them.
What really hits me with all this stuff with Fauci's coming out, and as we say, we call him goalpost Fauci, whatever. I think that one of the real risks that's happening here, we have basically 100 years, 125 years since the discovery of the scientific method, right? I.e. repeatable science. I think that there is a large section of planet Earth that is starting to lose faith in the expertise of the scientists at this point because they seem to have failed so many times.
The elites.
Look, if you're going to be a technocrat and fashion yourself as one, then be that guy. Don't be the guy going on Snapchat telling people it's okay to use Tinder.
We have over 80,000 dead, and we have 35 million people unemployed, which is Chicago says 40% are never getting their jobs back. We'll return in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
War Room's on fire today. That's because two big events. We're back to like Washington like it used to be. Breaking news, big controversies, big drama, big personalities. We got Fauci in crew over at the at one of the Senate committees. Senate committee, thank God, controlled by the Republicans, because at least we have some order and discipline. It's not going to be like this on Thursday. On Thursday, it's going to be the House, and trust me, folks, that's going to be showtime. Okay, fireworks are going to be blowing up when the head of BARDA goes in front of the. Is it House oversight? I think it's maybe another House committee. We'll find. I think it is House Oversight because of the investigation. But already we've had fireworks from Fauci. Doctor, move the goalpost, Fauci. What did he just say about? Let's reset here. And here's the thing: to leak it the night before to the New York Times, if he told the president and the vice president and the task force, "Hey, I'm adamantly opposed," because I've told you in council many times I'm adamantly opposed to what you're doing, and I've told you why, and I've given you the model why it's wrong, and it's going to be more death and agony. I've told you that, and you have decided to make the decision. So instead of resigning, instead of as a point of honor resigning, I'm still with it because I want to help the American people. However, when I go testify, I'm going to be 180 out from what you've been saying and what the nation's now moving on, in which the insurance company's going to go, hey, they gave a warning. Why should we be paying for any of this? You guys were warned by the doctor. So all that. You then go and I know you got permission to say, hey, I want to give this to the New York Times beforehand so they can spend 10 hours of all the morning shows getting ready to see St. Fauci.
So let's go through this.
Okay.
Late Monday night, Dr. Fauci sends an email to a New York Times reporter, which is then written up by Sheryl Stolberg, who's the health correspondent at the Times. And the email says, quote, the major message I wish to convey to the Senate HLP committee tomorrow is the danger of trying to open the country prematurely. If we skip over the checkpoints in the guidelines to open America again, then we risk the danger of multiple outbreaks throughout the country. This will not only result in needless suffering and death, but would actually set us back on our quest to return to normal, end quote from Dr. Fauci. But that's the 180. Now here's the country mile.
But the needless suffering and needless deaths.
But that's the 180, right? About where the president is and where the administration wants to go. But he's running even further away from the turn in that he's running a country mile down the road when he says right now this morning that the return of schools in the fall will be, quote, a bridge too far. That is new. That is devastating for many people.
Did he say vaccine was the bridge too far, or was it opening the schools?
It was within the context of having schools back in the fall that they were talking about no reopen, no ability to coalesce on campus without a vaccine, and the vaccine by the fall will be a bridge too far.
First off, note to self, and I've talked to some of the top people in the world this, there's no vaccine coming anytime soon. Okay, let's just make this. Yeah,
and look, the CNN chyron right now is Fauci, bridge too far to think treatment or vaccine could be ready in time for colleges to reopen in fall. New Raju from CNN tweets out also, so far Fauci has testified that treatments for a vaccine won't likely be available by the fall semester for schools, that the death count is likely higher than what's reported, and, quote, consequences could be really serious, end quote, if states open up ahead of White House task force guidelines.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and we have talked about this on the show last week. I don't know if any states right now meet the requirement of the 14-day decline, Mr. Jack Maxey.
They do not. But I think one of the things that is very important here.
What am I missing here?
Well, none of them have met the criteria. This is one of the problems with creating a one-size-fits-all criteria for the entire country. I mean, we are not New York out in the high plains of Montana.
Okay, I got that, but that's a theoretical exercise. The reality exercise, I've got these senior scientists on the presidential task force chaired by the Vice President of the United States that just completely contradicted what the president and the task force has made as they gave overall guidance. It wasn't a hard and firm mandate. Here's the question. Fauci and somebody up there, one of these Republicans have got to ask him the question, point blank. Did you tell the task force this, and did you walk through what you mean by needless deaths and suffering and economic consequences? Did you walk something more than some general airy-fairy concept, or did you actually back it up with what you meant? Did you tell them that? And what did you do when they decided to go in a different direction? Right? Why did you wait? Why are we waiting here to this hearing? This hearing could be scheduled or could not be scheduled. The city is shut down anyway, right? We're still shut down. The mayor, House of Representatives not even back. We don't know when they're coming back. So why does he? This would be something that would be DEFCON 1, Dr. Fauci, evidence-based, science-based, database, data-driven. Why did you not come forward at the time and say, we can't do this, I'm going to resign if you do this?
So, and tied right in with that, though, Admiral Brett Grohr, who's overseeing the coronavirus testing efforts, in his opening statement said that they believe they're going to have upwards of 40 to 50 million tests per month when we get into the fall.
40 or 50 tests per month.
40, 50 million.
Million tests per month.
Yes, if needed at that time. That's what he testified this morning.
They said at one time 3 million tests a day. That would be 90 million. So you're halfway to what they say. They at least this rule of thumb I've heard is they were talking about 3 million tests a day to be able to give and to have an adequate quote-unquote reopening. This is the first time I've heard, and people have to understand this. If we're not going to send people back to school to wait for a vaccine, then we got to get ready for a generation of Americans. We're going to go back to before Dewey was doing – we got to go back to how we're educating people in a different way, because we're going to educate people in a different way. You're not going to have – and I know some people out there with the Common Core crowd are going to say no more government schools. We're just not going to have any schools. Or you're going to have schools on not Zoom but whatever the non-CCP – Zoom is, you're going to have to think about re-educating kids. We're not going to have a vaccine anytime soon. And the other day they just said, hey, we may have to come up with 30 vaccines. I'm just saying the Chinese doctors and the doctors on the tip of the spear of SARS I've had a chance to talk to, and they tell me Fauci and these guys are wrong when they say, oh, the only reason we don't have a SARS vaccine, it wasn't a big enough market and the drug companies lost interest. Bull. I've talked to the guys that actually done the research, and they said, hey, it never got to a phase 3. And they said, what do you mean market? The market would be unlimited. Everybody in China would get it, okay? Because SARS, before coronavirus, SARS still haunts them. Remember, this is a country that lost half of the pigs. They're pork-driven society. Pork is a central part of their meal for their protein. They lost half. They bought Smithfield hams. The CCP bought Smithfield hams from good old Southside Virginia, right? To do experimentation and to control the pork industry, et cetera. And we lost half of the hogs to nobody talks about. Why do you think they're back at the table with Trump trying to cut a deal when they walked away in the spring saying, yeah, we don't like the Lighthizer deal. Kuttner said that deal was perfect. We don't like that deal. Upon further review, that actually makes us change. We don't think so.
Here's something interesting about that whole Smithfield deal. A lot of Americans are wondering why we're not seeing pork on our shelves, but we read the ag numbers and we're sending massive amounts of pork to China every year.
We've got to get back at that, though. I want to make sure that's the case because it's very confusing about this. But if that's the case, if we're shipping 1 ounce of pork over there where we don't have Costco full of pork, that's a problem.
Here's an interesting part of it. Last summer, Smithfield reorganized their slaughtering operation because the Chinese don't get that pork all chopped up into cuts. The pig will go to the chute without any human intervention. It's gutted and it's split into 3 pieces, and China where the final butchering gets done. So they only need one guy running a switch to pack these pieces of meat out.
This is why the War Room has Jack Maxey.
Yeah.
Now, only Jack Maxey would drill down. This is Greg Manson. This is the engine room of the War Room can get there. They go there, okay?
After the show, people should realize Jack gets up, walks into the war, and he's like, right, let's find out how those pigs are cut up.
Well, hold on, but that's...
No, it's upset him. He's a right-winger. It's upset him. It's like my dad. He's like my dad. They're still upset Smithfield got sold to the Chinese years ago.
Here's a way you could bring back jobs. Just say, hey, you can't send that thing unless it's been butchered.
Look, we're going to be playing the Bryan Adams songs during the break, so just get ready.
I don't know about that.
Which, by the way,
about Bryan Adams.
Well, hang on. Just let's slow down just a tiny little bit. We're jumping around so much here, and I just want to make sure that we're covering all the bases on this. Now, let's go back to the homeschool thing for a second here. Right, the Chinese, the CCP, are already aware that this thing is a thing, and they have this company, Lingobus, that has as its subsidiary what I've talked to you, VIP Kids, right? And so they're doing a lot of this online schooling and online, facilitation of like the teachers.
I didn't see the dots connected. Walk people through that.
So
thing.
I've talked to you about this before, and you kind of looked at me
what are you
talking about?
Now I get it. It's like the way you produce the show. When you get it here in the morning, you feel like I booked 9 guests, right? Halfway. No, walk people through this.
Yeah. So we actually did a piece about this at the end of April on the National Pulse, and it's entitled "CCP Link Firm one targets U.S. school kids with Chinese morality and values. So this Chinese learning platform Lingo Bus, they have this subsidiary called VIP Kids, and they have quote-unquote donated services to U.S. schools already in order to facilitate home learning and homeschooling. And this is something that parents out there want to be incredibly cautious of, because we've actually gone through a lot of these VIP Kid and Lingo Bus forums, the Reddits, the Discord channels with the teachers in it, and I've personally seen some of these teachers writing things like all caps "Hail China" in these groups. They are incredibly pro-CCP, these people. They are taught to be so. Their funding effectively comes from the CCP, and we've got loads of details on that to come.
Who can we get on the show tomorrow to talk about that? I mean, I know you, but is there like an education expert that can show us the insidious nature of the CCP?
I will make sure to get you somebody.
Also, what's really
tomorrow.
frightening for the mothers of America, this is a backdoor for the Chinese Communist Party to do facial recognition on your children.
This is why you shouldn't be on Zoom. If you're on Zoom,
like Fauci is right now.
If you're on Zoom, remember your total facial recognition by the CCP, by the Ministry of State Security, the CIA. I don't care what these guys say. Oh, we don't do it. It's a direct, hardwired right to them. Okay, and we're not going to back off.
Just very quickly, Fauci saying the U.S. death toll is quote almost certainly higher than what's been reported, and it's in quote entirely conceivable and possible there will be a second wave. That's live.
You can't make this stuff up. I got to tell you, they had every foreshadowing he was going to do this. And I don't have a problem if he did this to the task force and they knew about it, they were okay to allow this to happen. But if this is the first time they're hearing it, then we have a major problem. Back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We're going to shift gears for just a second. And the reason we're doing this is that this case is of such importance because, trust me, folks, they're going to be sending subpoenas all over the place for every piece of information. Now they got Fauci up there singing like a canary. They're going to be all over the Trump administration. They got this oversight committee on the House. The reason we want to get to what the Supreme Court's talking about today, because this is inextricably linked with how they're going to roll in on President Trump and the Trump administration. And if there's ever a Biden administration, how that's going to turn out. So this is a major deal. Jim Schultz, formerly one of the senior guys over at the White House counsel's office, a partner of Cousin O'Connor up in Philadelphia, a white shoe law firm. Don't know how he's a partner there. But a contributor on CNN and actually one of the most brilliant guys around in a frequent guest here to War Room Pandemic. Jim, you're actually listening in on the conference call. Just tell people, how unusual is that, given the hollowness of the Supreme Court? We're right across the street. It's like a Greek or Roman temple. It's one of the most impressive buildings in Washington for a reason. It's got this gravitas state. What does it feel like being on a conference call and hearing these arguments?
Well, I'll tell you, who's of those lawyers? I mean, you're really missing out on a lifetime opportunity, on a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I really think that, for the lawyers, for the judges, for the justices, I should say, it's not what was envisioned, and it's a shame that we have to do it this way. But nonetheless, I think it's been effective. I think Roberts has done a nice job. Chief Justice Roberts did a good job managing the court and managing the argument, and so far so good. Both sides are making their arguments, Steve, which we can get into.
Yeah, but I want to. Why is this such an important? This is supposedly one of the most important cases the Supreme Court's ever taken on since Nixon versus the United States back in 1974. Why is this so important? Why is this such a monumental case?
Look, this strikes right at the heart of the political process and what Congress can do in terms of oversight of an administration. And it's not just oversight. It was really interesting. The justices were focusing in on the word harassment a lot during this argument. And what can Congress do to a president, to tie up a president, to harass a president during his administration for things that have nothing to do with his presidency? And that's really the core question that they're answering. What standard is to be applied to this? What does the House need to do to issue a valid subpoena and justify that subpoena. A number of key questions, because we've seen all the subpoenas that have flown over to the administration from Congress. Most of them baseless as it relates to this particular issue. In fact, all of them baseless as it relates to the president's taxes.
Because the reason this is so monumental, back in 1974, this was about President Nixon and the tapes and the taping system. It was in the firestorm of Watergate, and it was basically, did Girdusky as a special prosecutor have the rights, and did the American people have the rights to listen to those tapes? This is quite different. This is President Trump's personal financial records. It's his personal tax returns. It's his relationship with Deutsche Bank as a senior lender. It's dealing with Donald Trump not as a president of the United States, but really Donald Trump as a real estate developer and businessman, is it not?
Absolutely. It's focusing in on the subpoenas were focusing on the president in his personal capacity prior to the time he was president, Steve. And that is unprecedented in terms of what they're asking for. Think about it. If what they're doing, and this argument was made, if back in the Carter administration they had a question about agriculture, now all of a sudden they can subpoena the president's records as it relates to his peanut, everyone would say that was ridiculous. Well, that's exactly what's happening here.
Let me ask you for our audience, and guys jump in here, but because, look, as you know from the war of impeachment, I'm far from a legal scholar. Hasn't the president lost essentially in every way up through the courts till we are today? And if that's the case, since it seems to me pretty straightforward, why did these other courts rule against him?
This isn't all that straightforward. And look, the other courts are ruling against him, and I think this is the right case to be before the Supreme Court. And the reason why it's the right case is because, like I said before, this goes to the core powers of Congress. And right now, what Congress is trying to do is regulate the presidency. They don't have a right to do that, and that's not a question that's being placed before this court right now. But that's the next step after this case, and we have and it cuts to the core of separation of powers. If Congress has the right to subpoena the personal papers of the president with no legitimate legislative purpose, zero legislative purpose, that just is entirely contradicts the purpose of the separation of powers. They shouldn't have a right to do that.
The reason we're doing this here on the Pandemic Show is we anticipate, given that Oversight Committee's going to meet next week, and you see Fauci's testimony already, that the administration is going to be inundated with subpoenas, inundated with, they've already subpoenaed, I think, some guys about the BARDA, which is the Scientific and Healthcare DARPA, which is advanced testing. The head is Richard Bright, I think. Dr. Richard Bright is the guy that's going up. But we anticipate that this is, and I don't want to call it a witch hunt, but there's going to be inundated with subpoenas and requests for information as they try to do quote unquote oversight and maybe politicize this thing. Is this case a good bill to thwart that, or you think that'll be a whole nother issue that we have to deal with?
A lot different, Steve, because there you're going to deal with executive privileges and communications between administrative officials. This is such a grave issue, Steve. This is talking about the president's personal papers prior to him being president, no legitimate legislative purpose whatsoever. And in fact, when they authorized the subpoena, one of the justices pointed out that it was so scant that you couldn't reasonably understand what the purpose of the subpoena was. That is what strikes at the core here. Not to mention, procedurally, the House, they allowed committee chairs essentially to authorize subpoenas of the president's private papers, personal papers, and documents that were relevant only to issues relating to things before he became president of the United States. And in those instances, that this strikes right at the core of separation of powers, Steve.
Jim, thank you very much for joining us. How do you get to, what's your Twitter feed so people can keep up with Jim Schultz? Since the CNN has somehow put you...
Schultz.
Give us that.
And one other thing, Steve, I was talking about process. Let me finish my thought on process there, because I ran afoul there for a second. The committee chairs issued the subpoenas without authorization of Congress. Here's the interesting thing, Steve. When they after the subpoenas were challenged, that's when Congress authorized the subpoenas, after they were called to the mat on their foul. And that was something the justices were really focusing in on, and I think an important fact in this case.
Jim Schultz, thanks for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you back on CNN. The operant world, Jim's pulled out already. The buried lead is harassment. I mean, I think they're asking the questions: is this harassing the president or any information in the subject that the people's House, the House of Representatives, need or the Senate needs to do appropriate oversight of an administration?
We have some good fireworks going on. So Rand Paul, I think obviously he's been a guest on War Room.
Huge fan.
Yes, he said to Dr. Fauci, "You are not the end all," and says it's a huge mistake to not return to school. Also bringing up the fact that younger people, kids, being less likely to get coronavirus, that should be a factor going into it. Dr. Fauci replies back, "I don't give advice about economic things," says that he's never said that he never made himself out to be the end all, but people are already diving into this. So Rand Paul just straight up
says you're not the end all. That would
all.
be Dr. Rand Paul, right? Rand Paul's a doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Rand Paul.
Well,
To be fair,
He's not a Dr. Ambassador Colonel. That would be Dr. Ambassador Colonel Burks.
This thing
where's the scarf? The scarf's not there today?
This thing about the schools is really critical, and it's being discussed all over the world. In fact, they did a survey of epidemiologists and virologists in Germany just yesterday, and only 5% of them support keeping the schools closed. They say it's ridiculous because of the level of infection.
What about this new issue they're coming out with in New York City about the young people you've got? And all I know if you cut on MSNBC or CNN, it's at least every hour. They've got a segment on this. They're in the. I'm not saying it's information warfare against the American mother, but when you come off of that segment, if you're an American mom, you're sitting there going, "What did they just say?" They just had some doctor saying kids can get it and they get deathly illness with them forever.
Agreed, but here's something that we have to remember. This also came out in the survey too. They said 82% of them surveyed. This is the epidemiologists, virologists, several hundred of them in Germany, said that the media is responsible for spreading too much fear. 82%. And I think one of the things that we have to remember with these kids having some immunological episodes with this coronavirus that is bad, but the coronavirus in terms of its lethality is not nearly as dangerous for children as seasonal flu.
But here's the fallacy. Here's the fallacy. No kids die of the flu. Here's what the problem is that if you're a parent, you're not looking at 100%. You're looking at the units that report to you, right? Those units report to you. You're going to say, "Hey, look, I hear it." And maybe 95% of the doctors say, "Well, I want to hear what the 5% got to say." And I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm just saying this situation, nobody knows nothing. You're at the very early stages of knowing what this disease is, right? And if all these guys coming up, and I'm just saying that if you got Fauci and these guys that are tying vaccines to school, that's what you got to go there and say, whoa, hang on for a second, doctor. Boris Johnson, what were you telling me?
Boris Johnson today had a very interesting comment where they have a 50-page Open Up Great Britain, and it's a bit vague, but it has steps to go forward. But one of the things he said in his opening statement, he said, look, while we want a vaccine and we want to hope for one, he said it's not going to be here in more than a year. And he said in the worst case scenario, we may never get a vaccine.
He's listening to War Room Pandemic. I'm just saying, you don't know. The vaccine is a total crapshoot. We may have Jonas Salk show up, and we got one within a year.
But hold on. Yeah. Let's go to really what the heart of this is. This is just the ultimate. I love how Raheem always says, as you guys call it, CYA. I mean, it's got to be universal.
I never heard of it before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're all honest where I come from.
But look, this is the master game of CYA by literally, he is, Dr. Fauci is the Michael Jordan of medical community CYA. He is the greatest of all time. This guy.
Well, hold on. Jordan's the greatest trash talker.
Oh, he's so good. But even when he was dissing my boy Gary Payton, I still had to smile and give it and say, "Go feed your cat. Go feed your cat, Scotty Burrell." Anyone who's not watching The Last Dance on ESPN Sunday nights, you got to go see it. Greatest documentary ever since we're throwing out the greatest. But look, a serious note. Dr. Fauci, this is the master CYA move because all he has to do is go out there and say, "Hey, keep it shut down in perpetuity. Bye, guys. I'm going to go walk 5 miles."
Somebody's got to ask him the question. In the highest councils of government, in the West Wing of the White House, in the Situation Room, the Kennedy Room, they call it, where they did the Cuban, in that down there, when you're sitting there at that task force, did you bring up and did you connect the concept of vaccine with opening schools? Did you say that? And some of these senators got to get to that level of specificity and ask him and say, "Look, dude, did you say that to the President of the United States? Did you connect vaccines?" Because this is the first we're hearing about it. Because Boris Johnson's right. it's going to be a year at the earliest if divine providence steps in here and does it, even if we get it manufactured. If you're tying together schools, because when you talk about colleges, every mom's out there saying, whoa, forget college. I got a kid that's in the third grade. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, let's create some infighting. If we're not going to have school next fall, don't you think it's time that we furlough all those unionized teachers around America? No reason for them to be working.
The right winger had to go. He went there.
Got some great news for Jason, though. The Premier League is due to reopen on June the 1st as a result of this Make Britain Great Again initiative by Boris. So you can cancel your Korean baseball, Jason. Manchester United shirt heading your way.
Well, I also disagree. The Major League Baseball thing, I don't like the fact they're redoing the playing teams and the interleague thing. I'm not into that at all. I think baseball's got to keep its tradition. But more importantly, what are we talking about games with no fans? It's not going to work.
Well, is this just about the DH?
No. It's about, wow, that's interesting. We're going to come back. We'll be back with Ryan Girdusky in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon. We cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Actually, Dr. Fauci's a demon, and we cannot let that demon hide, right? Come on, Fauci. We got breaking news from the panel itself.
Yeah, we have a couple of good things here. So, Rand Paul had some, as we mentioned this last break, last segment had some really tough comments on Dr. Fauci, which is good because someone needs to go and call him out. I mean, the Democrats are taking this all from the perspective of how do you go and turn this back against President Trump. When I said earlier, Steve, and you didn't quite get the reference, hopefully many in the audience did, but when we say someone's the Michael Jordan of, that means they're the greatest. And so when we talk about Dr. Fauci being the Michael Jordan of moving the goalpost, or he being the Michael Jordan of CYA, it means Dr. Fauci is the absolute undisputed king of moving accountability away from himself.
Big time.
And that's what we're seeing here. And so, look, we need to have it answered from Dr. Fauci. Steve, as you correctly pointed out, have you ever said to President Trump, schools cannot open this fall unless there's a vaccine? Because guess what? We might be sitting here for a good long time before schools ever open up.
Parents, if you're pulling your hair out right now because you're doing it every day job, and get ready. According to Fauci, you could be doing this forever.
Yeah, and then in other important news, look.
Before we put off that, our production staff tells us that Larry Bird is the greatest trash talker of all time. Michael Jordan tried to be the Larry Bird of trash talking.
Yeah, although I would still say many people are saying that Gary Payton was actually the best trash talker. By the way, the Kawoom Heroes are 6-1 on the season. So whenever my ridiculously priced Kawoom Heroes T-shirt arrives, I will bring it in.
Hold it, but he's been betting the over and under, so he's been getting ready to buy that River House now. If his winnings off Korean baseball, it's so filthy.
But Jason, what do you think about Jadon Sancho moving from Dortmund to United?
I don't know, but look, Park Byung-ho.
So against it.
We just lost 1,000 listeners.
Yeah. Hey, we've got.
But we gained 1,000 in Manchester.
We've got one of the firebrands in America. Ryan Girdusky is on. He's the editor and the founder of the Nationalist Populist newsletter. But before we pivot to him, Raheem's going to jump in here. And I think Raheem wants to jump in here because not enough links to Raheem's great content on the National Populist newsletter. No, talk about a populist and nationalist. Bolsonaro. Is he out in flames in Brazil because he's got Jack Maxey as his advisor?
I do not think Bolsonaro is going down in flames. And I really think in the end of the day, really what could he have done? I mean, you have a massively impoverished population. It's not like he was going to run ventilators into the favelas. But here's something that's very interesting. It goes to the heart of why we're starting to have a little bit of questioning concerning the tyranny of the scientists. Lancet, a medical journal, has apparently become a political journal. They wrote an op-ed yesterday about Bolsonaro, and they conclude in the last sentence, Brazil as a country must come together to give a clear answer to this so what, which was a comment by him. And he says by its president, Bolsonaro, he needs to drastically change course or he must be the next to go. This is what the scientists are doing. They're driving the politics.
This is a peer-reviewed journal. We're getting into all that tomorrow. Ryan Girdusky now joins us from Queens, New York. Ryan, you got an article up in American Conservatives talk about populism and this pandemic. Walk us through what you said.
Yeah, no, I think that, thank you for having me on, by the way. I think that right now, 2020 has not been a great year for populists on the left or the right. I'm sorry about that?
No, you're perfect. Keep going.
Oh, sorry. It hasn't been a great year for populists on the left or the right. I mean, you saw the downfall of Bernie Sanders, how AOC really wasn't able to galvanize any supporters in the House. for most of her legislation. Trump kind of backwalked on immigration moratoriums. But then you saw a dramatic shift where you saw all of the coronavirus money going to Wall Street and really not to the people as much as it should have. You're seeing huge support for a full immigration moratorium in our country. Really the questions of economics, immigration, nationalism, and a push against globalism and free trade, especially for China, has really hit the mainstream in a way that it hasn't since the 2016 election. And this could be a moment for nationalists to sit there and gain more supporters among people currently in office and people trying to run for office.
Ryan, Raheem here. I just wanted, in case you couldn't tell from the accent, you're the author of They're Not Listening, right, which is the new book. Now, quite clearly, they're still not listening. They haven't been listening through this crisis as well. And I want to drill down a little bit into your piece on the American Conservative on this as well. Okay, so we criticize Obama for the greatest transfer of wealth from the middle classes to the rich people. You mentioned this in your piece as well, $238 billion for the wealthy. How does a populist make the case that this administration has done anything different? And if you were in charge, if you were in the Oval Office, what would you have done differently in terms of helping the companies that needed to get out of this mess get out of it?
Well, I certainly think that the president has done. I mean, he's been slightly different in the sense that we saw some direct aid for people, but it just wasn't enough. The $1,200 lump sum was not enough for most Americans, and I just think that was really a missed opportunity. I said it on your show when I was last time on. I said it should have been a $2,000 check for 2 or 3 months directly stimulated into the American household. And by not doing that, and by caring a lot about the bottom line on Wall Street, we're looking at symptoms of greater economic instability. And people are worried about overall the need for demand. I mean, if you look at who has received the brunt of this economic fallout, it has been working class people. It has been people on hourly wages, working class people who a lot of them are minorities and are open to voting for Republicans.
Ryan, we've got to bounce. Give the one recommendation you would give President Trump today in the Oval Office of what he has to do to become more populist about his economic program.
Freeze all H-1B visas and all H-2B visas. Get Americans into those jobs. Use this as an opportunity to re-educate American workforce and American labor force into the jobs of the 21st century. This could be a transformational moment for the American workforce. We need to stop giving those jobs to foreigners and start making sure Americans get those jobs and work harder to bring all those jobs from China back to the United States rather than to India, which is where they're going right now.
Okay, how do people get access to your newsletter? How do they get access to your Twitter feed?
My Twitter feed is at Ryan Girdusky. The newsletter's at RyanGirdusky.com. There's also a link on my Twitter feed, and the book is available for pre-sale on Amazon.com. Comes out June 16th.
They're not listening to us, but we're listening to Ryan Girdusky. Thank you very much for joining us today on War Room Pandemic, one of the younger of the populist nationalist movement. Okay, tomorrow it's going to be post-game of today's testimony and pre-game on Thursday. If you think today's hot, you wait to the whistleblower. You wait to now we've got the whistleblower. We didn't have one in the impeachment process. We got one here. And hey, note to self, there's another 50 whistleblowers coming up because they're going to see what's going to happen. So this is going to be whistleblower summer as now we get into the politics of it all. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. And make sure you go to #WarRoomPandemic, all of our sites, get the newsletter. All of it's free. Give us a comment. See you tomorrow.